Happy day, oh glory be. Hi, folks. Chaplain Scott Savelle here with you today with another prophecy update. A lot going on in our world, but before we jump into all that, let me take a few moments to wish my younger sister Jennifer a very happy birthday. I do believe that she is celebrating the 19th anniversary of her 29th year, and that celebration will take place on Friday, February the 2nd. So happy birthday to you, Jennifer. I hope you have a wonderful birthday down there in Tennessee. Additionally, I want to ask you to go ahead and hit that like, subscribe, and share button. And speaking of like, subscribe, and share, we picked up a lot of new subscribers since my previous update. So welcome to all of you. Appreciate those of you who help spread the word about these updates and pray that all of our new subscribers will do the same. Also, I corresponded with my good friend Pete Garcia the other day and asked him about coming on this program. Maybe we could do a prophecy update together, and he said he would love to do that, but he's traveling right now for some prophecy conferences overseas in Australia and New Zealand. So pray for him and others who are traveling with him for traveling mercies, of course, and that the conferences will be a blessing to those who attend, and that they'll be better equipped to understand what is going on in these last days as we near the return of Christ for his church and the start of Daniel's 70th week. All right, well, let's jump right in, and we'll start in the Middle East. And by the way, I reworked my signs that indicate we are nearing the start of Daniel's 70th week. So here's the latest update to that. Instead of 7 signs or trends that I had on my previous image that I used last week, I added a couple of more at the encouragement of some other folks. So take a look at this, and I believe this pretty much captures everything going on in the world today that we'll be looking at so far as prophetic trends are concerned. We won't go over all of these today, but we will start with the first one, and that is Aliah. Sometimes I mispronounce it, and my good friend Stan out in Hawaii sends me the correct pronunciation. So, Stan, hopefully I'll do good on you today, and you won't have to employ your ministry of criticism. All right, I'm just kidding. Anyway, Aliyah, which speaks of Jewish immigration to the Holy Land. And so Jews are returning from all over the world to the Holy Land. We've looked at that off and on over the last several months, but especially since October the 7th. Well, Ezekiel chapter 36, verses 24 through 28 tell us, this is God speaking through the prophet Ezekiel, for I will take you from the nations, gather you from all the lands, and bring you into your own land. Then I will sprinkle clean water on you, and you will be clean. I will cleanse you from all your filthiness and from all your idols. Moreover, I will give you a new heart and put a new spirit within you. And I will remove the heart of stone from your flesh and give you a heart of flesh. I will put my spirit within you and cause you to walk in my statutes, and you will be careful to observe my ordinances. You will live in the land that I gave to your forefathers. So you will be my people, and I will be your God. So verses 25 through 28 are certainly yet future. Those things will take place over the course of Daniel's 70th week. The Bible tells us when Jesus does return, he returns at the moment all Israel alive at that time turns to him in faith and recognizes him as their Messiah. But before all that can happen, they have to return to the land. And so what we see today are trends that are pointing to the fact that the Jews will return to the Holy Land in preparation for Daniel's 70th week. And so verse 24, for I will take you from the nations, gather you from all the lands, and bring you into your own land. We see that in process today. Here's an article from the Jerusalem Post on January the 10th, 2024. Aliyah ministry gears up for increased immigration to Israel in 2024. And this article says, while it may be counterintuitive to immigrate to a country amid prolonged warfare, Israel has already begun to see an increase in interest for Aliyah from Jewish communities around the world. Jerusalem Post interim editor spoke with Aliah and integration minister Sofer on this interesting phenomenon as a result of rising anti-Semitism and worldwide Zionist spirit. In 2023, Israel has seen an astounding increase with 400% more inquiries in France and 100% more from North America. Sharing his personal experience from Aliyah Fair in Paris just 2 weeks prior, he explained that for many Jews, October the 7th has been a significant catalyst in their decision to move to the Jewish homeland. So, if you have been wondering whether or not the events of October the 7th and the war that followed is prophetically significant, I believe you have your answer now. The answer is yes, it was significant in that it is pushing things right along to their prophesied end, and that is Daniel's 70th week and all that will take place during that time. So let's move on now to the alignment of nations. And I have an article here from Breitbart. But before I read the article, let me read from Daniel chapter 2, verses 40 through 45. Then there will be a fourth kingdom as strong as iron, inasmuch as iron crushes and shatters all things. So, like iron that breaks in pieces, it will crush and break all these in pieces. In that you saw the feet and toes partly of potter's clay and partly of iron, it will be a divided kingdom, but it will have in it the toughness of iron, inasmuch as you saw iron mixed with common clay. As the toes of the feet were partly of iron and partly of pottery, so some of the kingdom will be strong and part of it will be brittle. And in that you saw the iron mixed with common clay, they will combine with one another in the seed of men, but they will not adhere to one another, even as iron does not combine with pottery. Now, of course, we know that Daniel interpreted a dream that Nebuchadnezzar had there in Daniel chapter 2, and he explained to Nebuchadnezzar the meaning of the statue that he saw in his dream, and he explained that it outlined really Gentile history from the time of Nebuchadnezzar until Jesus returns and sets up his kingdom. And so we know that today we are getting down into the feet and the toes as we are really looking for the rise of those 10 kings that the Bible predicts. And we know that out of those 10 kings, an 11th king will arise who will be the long awaited, or maybe we should say the long prophesied Antichrist. Of course, the church will not be here for the revelation of the Antichrist, but we may very well be here to see these 10 kings arise. And I believe it's possible that we're watching that happen right now with world events. But anyway, this article from Breitbart on January the 30th, World War III watch, prepare for Russian missiles, drones, sabotage against European cities, says NATO officer. A top NATO general warns the lessons of the Ukraine war shows Europe, its interior, and cities cannot expect to be left untouched if Russia and the alliance fight. Rear areas will be severely contested in an attempt to destroy lines of communication. In the case of a war between Russia and NATO, a top general from the alliance states, while warning the ability of NATO to credibly deter aggression has eroded since the end of the Cold War. So we see things going on in the East, we see things going on in the West, and one just has to wonder how all these things are going to work out. But ultimately, I believe they're going to work out, and that we see the alignment of nations predicted for the end times coming together really at a very rapid pace. So keep your eyes on all those things regarding the alignment of nations for the last days, because things are happening rather quickly and they don't always get reported here in America. So sometimes you have to dig for it, but there are a lot of good news sources out there where you can find that information. So the alignment of nations for the last days. Now, I came across some information that I looked at several years ago. Maybe you will remember when the French President Macron, I believe it was, talked about a Mediterranean Union similar to what they're doing in Europe. And if you lay all that out on a map, it looks strangely like the old Roman Empire. So one just can't help but wonder if this end times government, which is going to devour the whole world, but if it's going to be centered in the area of the old Roman Empire, and especially there in Western Europe, where I believe the Bible predicts that the Antichrist will arise from at some future time. But the Union for the Mediterranean, and you see the picture there on your screen of today's map and what that looks like. And then right next to it, you see a map of the old Roman Empire from about 117 AD, I believe. But the Union for the Mediterranean is an intergovernmental organization of 43 member states from Europe and the Mediterranean basin, the 27 EU member states, and the 16 Mediterranean partner countries from North America, Western Asia, and Southern Europe. It was founded on 13 July 2008 at the Paris Summit of the Mediterranean with an aim of reinforcing the Euro-Mediterranean Partnership, Euromed, that was set up in 1995 as the Barcelona process. Its general secretariat is located in Barcelona, Catalonia, Spain. If things could go in any number of directions, they always seem to go in the direction prophesied in the Bible. Well, let's talk a little bit about the anticipation for peace in the Middle East and how the world is trying to really force that through working it out through means of a two-state solution. This article, and by the way, Joel chapter 3, verse 2 says, and this is God speaking through the prophet, I will gather all the nations and bring them down to the valley of Jehoshaphat. Then I will enter into judgment with them there on behalf of my people and my inheritance, Israel, whom they have scattered among the nations, and they have divided up my land. So God is going to judge the nations ultimately because they divided up his land. Well, this article, Jerusalem Post, January the 30th, 2024, UK will consider recognizing Palestinian state, says David Cameron. The article, just a few lines from the article, UK Foreign Secretary David Cameron announced on Monday that Britain will consider recognizing a Palestinian state. The Guardian reported the following day, Palestinians must have a, quote, a political horizon so that they can see that there is going to be irreversible progress to a two-state solution, unquote, Cameron said. Following a meeting last week in Jerusalem with Prime Minister Netanyahu, Cameron also added that this is part of an attempt to pressure Israel decision makers to support such a proposal. So, not to be outdone, the U.S. is getting in on this, and this article, also, I believe, from the Jerusalem Post on January the 31st, U.S. could recognize Palestinian state after Israel's war with Gaza. The United States is engaged in ongoing planning processes on how best to advance the establishment of a Palestinian state, U.S. State Department spokesperson Matthew Miller said, but stressed that this was not a policy change. Yes, we are actively pursuing the establishment of an independent Palestinian state with real security guarantees for Israel, Miller told reporters in Washington on Wednesday. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken ordered the U.S. State Department to prepare staff work that will examine the possibility of American and international recognition of the state of Palestine the day after the war in Gaza. So the whole world now is talking about establishing or recognizing a Palestinian state, regardless of how Israel feels about it. We witnessed what a Palestinian state might look like down in Gaza and how it ultimately led to the events of October the 7th and the war that followed. So think about that as I read this article here that appeared in the Times of Israel on January the 28th. PA official, if Hamas were to win elections, we would hand it the government. The article says the Palestinian Authority's deputy prime minister said Saturday that President Mahmoud Abbas would be willing to hand control of his government to Hamas if the terror group were to win future general elections. In an interview with the Saudi news channel Saturday, he said that the Palestinian people need to find common ground and formulate a unified position, and that for the time being, the address for political decision is the Palestinian Liberation Organization and its president, Mahmoud Abbas. But after the war, the PA, quote, is ready to hold general elections, and if Hamas wins, the president will hand over authority, unquote. So let's now have a Palestinian state in Gaza and one in what the world refers to as the West Bank. The Bible refers to it as Judea and Samaria, and have Hamas terrorists in that part of the area as well, and see how that works out for them. Now, I personally believe that God is going to further judge nations like the United States and the European Union because of the pressure we are putting on Israel to accept this idea of a two-state solution. And if our leaders recognize a Palestinian state, I fear what might happen in our own country as a result, as God pours out his judgment. Now let's shift gears just a moment and talk about the temple. The fact that the Bible does predict that there is coming a time when there will be a third temple, a rebuilt temple there on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. A lot of passages that we could look at. We know that Daniel predicted it, Jesus predicted it, Paul predicted it, and John predicted it. But this passage from 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 4, speaking of the Antichrist, who opposes and exalts himself above every so-called God or object of worship, so that he takes his seat in the temple of God, displaying himself as God. The Bible does predict at the midpoint of the tribulation, the Antichrist will enter the temple. He will enter the Holy of Holies. He will declare himself to be God and demand worship. But this article in the Jerusalem Post on January the 23rd, father arrested after son bowed down on Temple Mount. A rabbi was detained on behalf of his son on Thursday for allegedly praying at the Temple Mount, the NGO reported. While on break from serving in the reserves on the Gaza border, Rabbi Yitzhak Pierman took his 3 kids to the Temple Mount. While on the stairs at the western side of the Temple Mount, his 3-year-old child playfully laid down on one of the steps, which led to a police investigation on suspicion that the child had prayed, the NGO said. Praying at the Temple Mount is illegal and violates existing rules for Jewish conduct at the site. This law has become extremely controversial and contentious. Numerous Jewish groups have been arrested for attempting to pray at the site. This article just goes to show you that there are Jews thinking about a future rebuilt temple, and so that articles like these just keep that in the forefront of our thinking, that somehow, some way, God is going to work all of this out so that his word is literally fulfilled in this matters. Moving right along, let's talk a little bit about anti-Semitism. This article was in the Jerusalem Post on January the 30th. Feds charge Massachusetts man for threatening Jews with genocide. Federal agents arrested a man who allegedly called Jewish institutions and threatened them with genocide because he believed they were supporting genocide of the Palestinians. Quote, guess what? We're going to use your logic. If you can kill the Palestinians, we can kill you, unquote, was one of a number of statements that John Reardon, 59, had allegedly left on a voicemail for a Jewish congregation there in Massachusetts. If you can, quote, if you can bomb their places of worship, we can bomb yours. If you can kill their children, we can kill yours, unquote, he said. Anti-Semitism certainly has been brought out into the forefront since October the 7th, and we know that based on other articles we've looked at, that this anti-Semitism has caused a significant increase in the number of Jews who are filing applications to return or to immigrate to Israel, to their ancient homeland. So continue to pray for the Jewish people that God would, number one, protect them, and number two, bring them to faith in Jesus as their Messiah. Talk a little bit about globalism, that authoritative government that the Bible predicts for the last days. And some prophecy teachers believe we will see some type of global government first that will then break into 10 kingdoms or 10 regions. I sort of lean in that direction, but I'm not 100% on that. I'm not dogmatic about it. I believe it's going to unfold however God wants it to unfold, but ultimately we will see 10 kings, and from those 10 kings, an 11th king will arise that we know to be the Antichrist. But anyway, listen to this article from CBS on January the 7th, 2024. World leaders are gathering. This is speaking of the World Economic Forum, so this has already taken place. But world leaders are gathering to discuss disease X. Here's what you need to know about the hypothetical pandemic. Now, what I believe you need to know is that as we near the 2024 presidential election, and the more it looks like Donald Trump is not only going to be the Republican nominee, but maybe even it looks like he's going to be reelected, I think disease X might come on the scene. Anything they can do to lock us down again, and to have mail-in ballots and basically repeat what happened in 2020. I believe they would very possibly do. But anyway, listen to this article. World leaders gathered at the World Economic Forum's annual meeting in Davos, Switzerland on Wednesday to discuss disease X, a hypothetical virus 20 times deadlier than COVID-19. While such a virus isn't known to currently exist, researchers, scientists, and experts are hoping to proactively come up with a plan of action to combat such viruses and prepare the health systems if it were to emerge as a pandemic. A possibility, one expert told CBS News, that could happen sooner than we think. It's almost like they're telegraphing things to us. And then this article from Yahoo News, which I believe got it from a news site called Reason, on January the 18th, the World Economic Forum is begging you to trust the science. How many times have we heard that? This year, the WEF has upped the ante, releasing a report that lists misinformation and disinformation as the number one short-term risk facing the world, beating out interstate armed conflict, climate change, and lack of economic opportunity. Societal polarization, which is closely linked to misinformation and disinformation, came in third. One of the first events at this year's meeting was a panel discussion, Liberating Science, which largely focused on disinformation as it relates to the climate change agenda. Skipping down, first, the participants frequently describe science as something approaching a catechism. So it's a religion with these people. Why? And then another participant asked, why is populism increasing? He asked, I don't understand. They are all anti-science. Why in democracies are we electing anti-science politicians? Second, the panelists were, for the most part, unable to answer the above question, offering unconvincing explanations, such as misinformation is easier to obtain than true information. Technology makes everything more complicated. The news spreads too fast in today's world, etc. At no point during the hour-long discussion did any of the panel experts ever explore the idea that perhaps some of the backlash against the science stemmed from pandemic-era policy mistakes made by governments at the behest of health advisors. And then skipping down, another participant during her remarks was correct in pointing out that science is not democratic. At the end, there is one truth, she said: the scientists don't vote. That's undoubtedly true, but in a democracy, the people do vote on what the government is supposed to do with the information provided by the scientists. Too many members of Team Science overreached by trying to control the policy and the messaging, even when they were wrong. So we see how these world leaders, the world's elite, it's almost like they've read the script in Daniel chapter 2, chapter 7, and Revelation 13, as it speaks about what's going to happen in the last days and how these 10 kings are going to arise and how this future world leader is going to come on the scene. And it's almost like you can see this stuff just converging together at an accelerated pace. But listen to Daniel chapter 2, verse 40. Then there will be a fourth kingdom as strong as iron, inasmuch as iron crushes and shatters all things. So, like iron that breaks in pieces, it will crush and break all these in pieces. So, speaking of Rome, of course, but Rome never really fell, and the Bible does indicate that some form of this ancient Roman Empire is going to arise in the last days, but it's not going to stay right there in the Mediterranean basin where the Mediterranean Union is, or there in Western Europe where the European Union is. It's going to devour the whole world. Daniel chapter 7, verse 23, thus he said, the fourth beast will be a fourth kingdom on earth, which will be different from all other kingdoms, and it will devour the whole earth and tread it down and crush it. So the Bible predicts these things for the last days, and we see the world moving in that direction at an accelerated pace. Well, let's look at some additional signs. I shared this one in a prophetic trends update the other day, but this article from Breitbart, and I believe Breitbart got it from the BBC, but on 30th of January, Elon Musk announced that Neuralink has implanted its creepy brain chip into a human. And in my prophetic trends update the other day, just a YouTube short on this subject, I indicated that this was days of Noah type stuff. Matthew chapter 24, verse 37, Jesus speaking, for the coming of the Son of Man will be just like the days of Noah. So if you go back to Genesis chapter 6 and see some of the activity that was going on there with the Nephilim, and then Jesus looking back to the Genesis flood and what led up to it, said that his future return would be just like in the days of Noah. So this is days of Noah type stuff here. Tech billionaire Elon Musk announced yesterday that his company Neuralink has successfully implanted its first brain chip into a human patient. Now, the author of the article is a little bit biased like me. The quote actually says tech billionaire Elon Musk announced yesterday that his creepy company, Neuralink, has successfully implanted its first brain chip into a human patient. The article goes on to say that the first human implant of Neuralink's brain chip has been completed and is showing positive results so far. Musk stated on X, formerly Twitter, that the first Neuralink product will be called telepathy and will allow users to control devices like phones or computers simply by thinking. While the technology is still in the early research stages, Musk envisions it could eventually help paralyzed patients communicate faster than typing, or even allow for symbiosis with artificial intelligence. So days of Noah type stuff. So keep your eye on that as well. And one other, a couple of more areas I want to look at. The first one here being the demonic and paranormal. This article, let's see here, January the 16th from Yahoo News. God versus UFOs, a new film about the paranormal side of UFOs. Now, this film is available on YouTube. I watched it the other night. It's actually fairly interesting. The sound wasn't that great, so I had to turn my TV up really loud and then remember later to turn it back down. But from the article, this documentary explores otherworldly aspect of UFOs, looking at whether there are links with the paranormal or whether science and the mysterious world of quantum physics can explain the phenomena. It also looks at the religious and spiritual side of UFOs, with many British and U.S. governments sincerely believing that UFOs are demonic or satanic in origin. It also looks into Project Bluebeam, which is a conspiracy theory alleging that the deep state or the Illuminati are planning to use cutting-edge holographic technology to create a false flag, alien invasion, or a fake flag second coming of Christ. The aim is put populations into fear, is to put populations into fear and to usher in a one world government. Continuing on, the film looks at whether UFOs could be some sort of interdimensional craft or beings that humanity has been interacting with since time began. This could account for fairies and earth spirits and ancient culture saw, or even the biblical angels and demons. Maybe science could explain this. One professor states that alien life might be using other dimensions to visit us, which would explain how they are able to travel such vast distances across the universe. We also speak with renowned demonologist Ian Broadmoor, who worked alongside Reverend Paul Inglesby on Admiral Lord Hill Norton's report into UFOs, which stated that they were demonic in origin. And so my own personal opinion and position is that they are demonic in origin. If they are truly UFOs or UAPs that can't be explained away by something else, they are certainly, to me, they are paranormal and they are demonic in origin. And so listen here to what Paul said in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 9. The coming of the lawless one is by the activity of Satan with all power and false signs and wonders. And so lying signs and false wonders in the last days. Imagine that. And moving right along, Nevada County Commission opens meeting with satanic invocation. Quote, the new age is dawning, unquote. This appeared on KATU News Channel 2, which is an ABC affiliate, on January the 17th. A Nevada governing body on Tuesday opened its meeting with a religious ceremony by a local Satanist group. Reno Satanic, a non-theistic Satanist group, delivered an invocation before the Washoe County Commission, which began with a chant in Latin. In the name of the eternal rebel against tyrannical authority, Reno Satanic founder Jason Miller began to bring influence and guiding actions of nobility and justice to the decisions made in this chamber today, to act with might in the undertaking of responsibility that may lay ahead of this body before us today. The new age is dawning, that these decisions may play a role in. And he went on to say a few more things, but he concluded his prayer or his chant with the phrase, Hail Satan. So obviously these folks don't have any idea what they're fooling with, but isn't it interesting in these last days that we see a rise in Satanism, the demonic, the paranormal, and all those things? Well, a lot of heavy stuff today, so I thought we would conclude with a look at another prophetic trend that we don't really talk about that much, and that is the advancement of the gospel. In Matthew chapter 24, verse 14, Jesus said, "And this gospel of the kingdom will be proclaimed throughout the whole world as a testimony to all nations, and then the end will come." Revelation chapter 7, verse 9, "After this I looked, and behold, a great multitude that no one could number, from every nation, from all tribes and peoples and languages, standing before the throne and before the Lamb, clothed in white robes with palm branches in their hands." My wife and I support the Jesus Film Project, and we from time to time get reports about that. But here's a story from the Jesus Film Project website. At first, I was hesitant to show the Jesus film to my fellow tribesmen because of their pagan beliefs, stated Pastor Timka, an indigenous leader in a Southeast Asian nation. He continued, "But I was amazed to see the people stay until the end of the showing. There were 157 viewers, and 50 people from his tribe responded to the gospel message and prayed to accept Jesus into their lives." The pastor mobilized Jesus film showings in 2 other locations and witnessed his people responding to the message about Jesus Christ through the film. The local churches that sponsored the showings were encouraged as local pastors followed up with the respondents. Although hindered by heavy rain and at one point a strong typhoon, the ministry of sharing the gospel continued to grow as 346 tribal people were added to the kingdom of God. So in the last days, especially in that period of time we refer to as the Great Tribulation, Daniel's 70th week, we believe we'll see probably the greatest revival the world has ever seen, as many, many, many people come to faith in Jesus, and ultimately most of those will pay with their with their life. But we see trends in that direction as we see the gospel continuing to spread around the world. And this example here from the Jesus Film Project is just one of many examples that we could cite about how the gospel is impacting others for Jesus Christ. And speaking of advancing the gospel, my wife will be going on her second mission trip to Alaska in March. She'll be in Nome, Alaska, there for the Iditarod finish, and she went last year, and she's going back this year, and she will have opportunities to minister to those there and to share the gospel. So pray for her in that trip. I'm looking into a possible opportunity for my son and I to do over his spring break that will involve him in mission activities. So pray that God would provide an opportunity for that. And also, I'm slated to go to the Dominican Republic in July to be a part of a mission team that my church is sending. And my church has been sending teams going back several years now. They've built numerous churches and houses for pastors. And so this will be my first trip, though. So pray for me. I believe they're taking me along because the pastor isn't able to go. And so I'll be doing some preaching while we're there. And preaching through an interpreter is always a challenge, but I've done it before and I'm looking forward to doing it again. But in the meantime, please pray for all of us as we prepare for these mission trips, and just pray that God would open doors of opportunity to share the gospel. Also, I have shared in the past that I went back to work for an organization that shares the gospel with those in the workplace. So just pray for me that God would open more doors, that I would have more opportunities to share the gospel, not just in the workplace, but really out in the community as well as I encounter others. And I hope and pray that you too are taking seriously Jesus' command back in Matthew 28 to share the gospel with everyone, everywhere, as God gives you opportunity, and that one of these days when we all get to heaven, we'll be able to meet all of those who responded to the gospel because of our obedience. In the meantime, may God bless you and your family, and as always, keep looking up. God bless.